There is one detail in this war that almost nobody is talking about, and it may be the reason everything is about to change. Because when you look closely at what just hit Israel, the real story is not only about explosions, but about what got through the defenses. On Sunday the 29th, Iran launched devastating attacks across Israel, and the first question was not how many missiles were fired, but how many actually got past the shield. Iranian ballistic missiles tore through Israeli air defenses and landed in places that should have been protected. One strike hit a town just minutes from Jerusalem, and that single impact exposed a weakness that defense planners cannot ignore. Homes were destroyed, 19 people were injured, and the blast zone stretched across roughly 150 meters. The Israeli Air Force has already opened an investigation into why its interceptors could not stop it. And that is where the mystery begins, because this was not an isolated failure. According to reports, the Iranian attack was followed by 6 separate salvos, and one of them set a chemical factory on fire inside one of the most hazardous industrial sites in the country. At the same time, 11,000 workers were forced into safe rooms, and a chemical leak warning spread across the entire zone. While that was happening, Hezbollah unleashed more than 600 rockets from Lebanon in a single day. Then the Houthis fired at Israel from Yemen for the first time. 3 directions, 3 fronts, one country under constant pressure. Welcome to Global Military Updates, because we need to talk about how Israel is being cornered from multiple sides at once and why the next phase of this war could be far worse than the last. The town that took the hit near Jerusalem was a small community in the corridor west of the capital, but the impact was anything but small. Israeli officials confirmed that the incoming warhead was a conventional Iranian ballistic missile carrying several hundred kilograms of explosives. Interceptors were launched. They failed to connect. The missile detonated on the ground and ripped through homes, shredded vehicles, and cratered the area like a reminder that even advanced systems have limits. Drone footage from the scene showed gutted structures and flattened cars scattered across the blast zone. And here is the part that should make every defense analyst pause. This was the second time in just 8 days that a ballistic missile had penetrated Israeli air defenses in the Jerusalem corridor. The first strike had already shown that the shield was not perfect. The second strike made that weakness impossible to ignore. Then came a separate launch aimed at the Jerusalem area, and sirens spread across the capital region as lawmakers were forced to run for shelter. Inside the Knesset, members were mid-debate on the 2026 state budget when the session was suddenly suspended. The parliament evacuated in the middle of a vote because Iranian warheads were moving through the sky overhead. That image alone tells you how dangerous this moment has become, and yet that was still not the most dangerous part of the day, because in the south, Iran expanded the target set again. A ballistic missile struck an open area in Beersheba, landing only dozens of meters from residential buildings. The shockwave blew out windows across roughly 100 homes. Some buildings suffered damage so severe that residents could not return. That blast was one of at least 6 or 7 separate Iranian missile salvos fired at Israel on Sunday alone. The south was hit. The center was threatened. The north stayed under pressure. And then came the strike that turned a military headline into a hazardous materials crisis. One of the missiles sent debris into the Adama Mactation factory at the Net Hovav industrial complex, south of Beersheba. Net Hovav is not just another industrial site. It is one of the most sensitive chemical zones in Israel, with dozens of facilities, ammonia storage, and thousands of workers inside a tightly concentrated area. The fragment ignited a fire inside a pesticide facility. The fire services confirmed that the leaking substance was a pesticide. The Home Front Command immediately declared a hazardous chemical event. Workers were ordered into safe rooms. Civilians nearby were told to seal windows, shut off air conditioning, and stay indoors. Highway 40 was closed. Fire and rescue teams rushed in to seal damaged storage units and stop further leaks or explosions. The company later confirmed that its Maktesh plant had been hit. For hours, thick black smoke hung over one of the most chemically concentrated sites in the country. And that is the real lesson in this moment. Iran did not need a direct hit on a storage tank to force a shutdown across an entire industrial zone. A fragment was enough. A near miss was enough, and that is the kind of pressure no interceptor system can fully solve. Before we go deeper, thank you for being here, because this kind of coverage only matters when people stay informed and pay attention to the pattern, not just the headline. So here is the question that really matters. What exactly is failing in Israel's defense network, and why are more missiles getting through than people expected? Most viewers assume the answer is Iron Dome. It is not. Iron Dome is built for short-range rockets and mortars, especially from Gaza and Lebanon. It was never designed to stop Iranian ballistic missiles arriving from more than 1,500 kilometers away. The system doing that job is David's Sling, the medium-range layer in Israel's defense architecture. It sits above Iron Dome and below the highest-tier interceptor layer. But David's Sling was originally engineered for heavy rockets and cruise missiles, not long-range ballistic threats. In February, The Defense Ministry announced upgraded testing for the system. The message was simple. The system was improving. The reality, however, was very different. Weeks later, those new capabilities faced their first real combat test, and the results were far from reassuring. On March 21st, Iranian ballistic missiles struck Arad and Dimona after failed Israeli interceptions. Reuters reported that 31 people were hospitalized in Arad, including 9 seriously injured, and other reporting later put the total number of injured across the broader wave much higher. Israeli officials said the missiles carried conventional warheads, and now the question becomes impossible to avoid. If the system is layered, why are the missiles still getting through? The answer lies in what Israel uses, when it uses it, and what it is trying to save. Its top-tier system, Arrow 3, is designed to kill ballistic missiles outside the atmosphere. Arrow 3 launches its kill vehicle into space, where the target can be destroyed before it ever falls back to Earth. That is the cleanest solution. But it is also the most valuable one. David's sling catches warheads inside the atmosphere during the terminal descent phase, much closer to the ground. When David's sling hits, interceptor shrapnel can still fall on Israeli territory. When it misses, the warhead lands almost immediately, leaving no time for a second attempt. That creates a brutal problem. The higher-end interceptors are expensive. The cheaper layers were not built for every kind of threat. And the more Israel saves one class of missile for a future emergency, the more vulnerable it becomes in the present. According to Israeli reporting, a David's sling interceptor costs roughly 1 million shekels, while an Arrow 3 interceptor costs just over 2 million shekels. The Wall Street Journal reported that Israel had begun conserving its premium interceptors and rotating in cheaper alternatives. A senior security official told Calculist that Arrow 3 is the definitive answer for this kind of threat, because that is what it was built for. But saving the right interceptor for the right moment is a gamble when the sky is full of warheads. Former Israeli air and missile defense commander Ron Kokov told the Washington Post that the failure could involve radar faults, interceptor defects, connectivity failures between layers, or simple probability. He called it a very sophisticated system, but not a hermetic one. And that is the phrase that should worry everyone. Not hermetic, not perfect, not invincible. Because one flaw in the chain can let a missile through, and once that happens, the damage is already done. There's another layer that makes the threat even more serious. Israeli military officials cited by Reuters said that about half of the Iranian missiles fired since the war began have carried cluster warheads. Those warheads typically break into about 24 submunitions, at an altitude of roughly 7 to 10 kilometers. Once the bomblets are released, they are effectively no longer interceptable. That means the real battle is not just against the missile itself. It is against time. It is against altitude. It is against the tiny window before the payload breaks apart. And that is why the repeated failures matter so much. Because every time the system waits too long or chooses the wrong layer, the threat multiplies on the way down. Most people still think this is a two-front war between Iran and Israel. It is not. Israel is absorbing simultaneous fire from 3 directions, and the northern front is producing a volume that most people still underestimate. Hezbollah fired more than 600 rockets, mortars, and drones at Israeli targets in a single 24-hour window. The IDF confirmed that number. The previous record was around 300 during the 2023 to 2024 border conflict. Hezbollah doubled it. Since entering this phase of the war, Hezbollah has been averaging 100 to 150 attacks per day. That is not symbolic pressure. That is sustained operational strain, and people are dying under it. Staff Sergeant Ori Greenberg, 21, of the Golani Brigade's reconnaissance unit, was killed in a firefight with Hezbollah operatives in southern Lebanon on March 26th. Sergeant Moshe Yitzchuk, 22, a lone soldier from New Haven, Connecticut, serving in the Paratroopers Brigade, was killed by a Hezbollah rocket on March 28th. 3 other paratroopers were moderately wounded in that same strike. In a separate incident that same day, approximately 20 soldiers were injured by Hezbollah rocket fire. 7 were moderately wounded, including a lieutenant colonel from the elite Yahalom Combat Engineering Unit. Channel 12 reported more than 78,000 warning sirens across Israel since February 28th. Think about that number for a moment. 78,000 sirens. That means entire communities are living in a state of permanent interruption, fear, and exhaustion. In Safed, an 11-year-old girl went into cardiac arrest during an incoming siren and had to be resuscitated by paramedics. 1 civilian was killed by Hezbollah rockets in Nahariya. Hezbollah even launched missiles at central Israel, claiming it targeted the IDF Kiryat headquarters in Tel Aviv. The IDF said those missiles were intercepted, but a woman still suffered a moderate head injury while rushing for shelter. And just when it seemed the region could not absorb another front, a third axis opened. On March 28th, Yemen's Houthis launched ballistic missiles directly at Israel for the first time in this conflict. Sirens sounded again. A second missile followed. The Houthis vowed to continue until the aggression against all resistance fronts stops. Iran from the east, Hezbollah from the north, the Houthis from the south. And above all of that, a defense system stretched thinner every single day. But the military picture is only half the story. Because while Israel is being hit, the wider region is paying a price that could spread far beyond the battlefield. Iran's IRGC struck Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia on March 27th and destroyed at least one E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft. That is not just a plane. It is a flying command center worth about $500 million, used to coordinate combat across entire theaters. 3 KC-135 Stratotanker refueling aircraft were also destroyed. The Associated Press reported that more than 24 U.S. airmen were wounded. Since February 28th, Iran has hit at least 17 U.S. military facilities across the region, targeting radar and sensor installations. 13 U.S. service members are dead. More than 300 have been wounded. The Pentagon has already consumed $5.6 billion in munitions during the first 48 hours of the campaign alone. And that number matters because war is not only decided by firepower, it is decided by endurance. Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of U.S. Central Command, confirmed American forces have struck more than 11,000 targets inside Iran, but also acknowledged that Iranian fire continues. That means the cost is rising on both sides. Every interceptor launched is expensive. Every missile fired is expensive. Every strike that lands creates political pressure. Every strike that misses creates military pressure. And the math is starting to look impossible. Arrow 3 costs about $650,000 per shot. David's Sling costs about $320,000. A THAAD interceptor, the American backup deployed in the region, cost approximately $15 million. Iran's ballistic missiles cost a fraction of any of those systems to build and launch. That is the economic trap. Every exchange bleeds the defense budget at a far higher rate than offense, and that ratio does not correct itself. It compounds. The global economic blast radius is widening just as fast as the military one. The Strait of Hormuz, the waterway carrying around 20% of the world's seaborne oil, has been functionally shut since March 4th. Gulf production has fallen by at least 10 million barrels per day. The International Energy Agency called this the greatest global energy security challenge in history. The U.S. and its allies have already released 400 million barrels from strategic petroleum reserves, the largest drawdown ever attempted. But geopolitical strategist Marko Papic of BCA Research warned that the world could hit an oil cliff by mid-April when emergency reserves and exemptions expire. Diesel prices across the European Union have risen sharply, breaking past €2 per liter. In the US, diesel jumped by 25%. Iran also struck aluminum smelters in the UAE and Bahrain, knocking 19% of Alba's annual capacity offline in a region that supplies 9% of global aluminum. Kuwait, which gets 99% of its drinking water through straight-fed desalination, now faces a looming humanitarian emergency as infrastructure is damaged. So this is no longer just a battlefield problem. It is an energy problem, a logistics problem, a humanitarian problem, and a political problem that is spreading faster than many governments can publicly admit. Now step back and look at the whole picture. An Iranian missile got through near Jerusalem. Multiple casualties were reported in Eshtal. Sirens sounded again around the capital. A hazardous industrial fire erupted at the Adama Mactation plant in Nehovov after a missile or interceptor debris hit the site. Heavy Hezbollah fire continued from Lebanon. The Houthis opened a southern axis. Iran struck Prince Sultan Air Base and wounded U.S. personnel. Oil markets came under severe stress as the Strait of Hormuz remained effectively closed. 30 days in, the Iranian government is still standing, still launching, and still imposing a mounting cost on every layer of the coalition trying to stop it. That is the part no one can afford to miss. Because if this pace continues, the question is no longer whether the region will change. The question is how much more it can absorb before something breaks. And once that point arrives, there may be no clean way back. Thanks for watching. Share this video with anyone following this conflict right now. Leave a comment with your opinion on whether Israel's defense network can hold under this pace. Tell me whether you think this war has already passed the point of no return. And make sure you like, share, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Market Mindset for more updates.